But getting back to my friend and colleague, Susanna Katsman, she specializes in leadership development consulting, facilitation, and coaching. And I've known Susanna for so many years. We go way back to when we both worked at Harvard University. And it's just a pleasure to be able to work with Susanna in this capacity. She's very talented and very experienced, and I think you'll find some real value in this program. So I'm not going to spend any time actually reading Susanna's bio. We are putting in the chat a link to her bio, which you can find on the website. We really want to use this time to have you learn from Susanna. So Susanna, thank you for sharing your insights today, and I'll turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Diane. I appreciate that warm welcome. I'm delighted to be here and welcome everyone to the workshop. I'm really excited to engage with you today on this topic. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Here we go. So this is about serving on workplace committees when you don't have experience. The good news is that you can contribute meaningfully and valuably right from where you are, and that is how you get experience. Our session will have a certain flow to it. There are 3 broad topics that I'll be sharing with you information on: how to prepare to lead a productive meeting, how to effectively facilitate and participate in a meeting, and then how to keep the momentum going in between meetings. And after I cover each of the topics, I will take questions, and then I will also give you an opportunity to reflect on what you've just heard and to jot down some notes that will hopefully serve you well as you prepare to lead and participate on committees. So the first thing, as you set out to prepare to lead a committee meeting, is to understand the purpose of the group. And before I move on, I just want to let you know that there is a resource packet that is going to be shared with you. So you don't have to take notes. You can just focus on listening. All of this information is laid out in the resource packet. And I believe the link is going to be dropped into the chat during the session. So understanding the purpose of the group. How, if you are not presented with the purpose and you're not sure, here are some of the things that you can do. You can ask the stakeholders, people that want your committee to succeed, people that want to see positive outcomes come out of your efforts. You can ask them, how do they see the group's purpose? And if you're not sure who those stakeholders are, then you can ask the person who invited you to lead the committee about who those stakeholders are. You can ask them, who should I talk to understand the purpose of this committee well? After you are clear on the purpose of the committee, then understand or set the goal of the meeting. And the goal of the meeting should support the purpose of the committee. And it should answer the questions of what concrete outcome or outcomes would mean that the meeting was successful. Before I move on to the next slide, just want to invite you to let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow, or if anything else that I should do differently to make this a good learning experience for you. So you can chime in the chat, and Diane or Emanuela will let me know. I'm going to assume that so far, so good. So what else can you do to prepare for a productive meeting? So you're clear on the purpose of the committee. You've set the goal for the meeting. The next thing is to draft an agenda. and make sure that just like the goal of the meeting supports the purpose of the committee, each agenda item supports the goal of the meeting. And this is one instance where more is not better. Having a laundry list of agenda items is not going to be helpful. It is better to have really good substantive 3 to 5 topics, and also suggested time limit for each topic so that you can get to each one during the course of the meeting. And I have included a template for a meeting agenda in a resource packet. Again, it is there for you. I hope you find it helpful. Share the agenda before the meeting. When you share agenda a few days before the meeting, you give people an opportunity to be familiar with what they can expect. So it is also good to send it not just to the participants of the meeting, but to a stakeholder, a key stakeholder, a person who wants to see your committee succeed. And you can let them know, this is just FYI, this is my plan for an upcoming committee meeting. And please let me know if I've missed anything of importance, or I welcome your comments and feedback. You want to invite them to have input, because it's really good to have that key stakeholder engaged in your committee, even though they may never attend an actual meeting. Okay, so that was the overview of how to prepare for a productive meeting. I'm going to stop screen share, and I will take any questions or comments related to committee purpose, meeting goal, setting an agenda, and keeping stakeholders involved. So feel free to unmute yourself or raise your actual or virtual hand and let me know what's on your mind.
Hi, Susanna. Joe Sandigato from MGB. How are you?
Hi, Joseph.
I appreciate and agree with everything that you said, but I'm wondering if you have some thoughts about how to handle ambiguity when you start that outreach process. Sometimes we think something has more traction than it has, or we think it's more informed than it is. Do you have any good tips for when you start the outreach and you're not getting a lot of information or feedback back during that process?
Yes, great question. Thank you, Joseph. And just to follow up on your question, when you say outreach, what exactly do you mean?
So part of your suggestion, I fully agree with and employ, which is reaching out to stakeholders, reaching out to people who may have been predecessors in leading this work to help inform the direction you're moving in going forward. But it's been my experience that sometimes there are lags in work, and sometimes it's kind of gone off track a little bit. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts may be about how to encourage conversation when you engage in that feedback and you're not getting back a whole lot of context or content.
Yeah, so that is such a great question, because we operate in a lot of ambiguity these days. And so it's good to anticipate that you may not be given clear marching orders from your stakeholders. So what do you do? I prefer to see it as an opportunity to contribute to the creation of committee purpose. And maybe when you're asking stakeholders what it is that you want to see as an outcome and you're not getting a clear answer, you can suggest some potential outcomes. You can say, given the skill sets, the expertise, the interests of the committee, and the strategic priorities of MGH at this time, we think that this would be a good outcome of our work that we could shoot for. What do you think about that? So you're putting something out there for the stakeholder to respond to if they're not giving you clarity. How is that landing with you, Joseph?
No, that lands very well. And I think the ambiguity is one of the challenging pieces sometimes in this work, right? That there's been change, or you're moving in a new direction. So I appreciate that feedback. I think that's very helpful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And another thought to consider is make it explicit to the committee and put it positively. Say we have an opportunity to define the purpose of our committee. So given the collection of people that we are and everything we bring to the table, and given what the organization is experiencing at this time and what the vision, the larger vision is, I welcome your thoughts on how we could craft our purpose.
It's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for that question, Joseph. Anyone else?
Hey, Suzanne, my name's Roger Guzman, and I just want to amplify that statement that you made. And this statement that I'm going to make may sound weird, but I relish the ambiguity. I enjoy the ambiguity, because what I've found is that no one person has all of the answers, right? And so while there may be guidance and you might have some structure that has been set up, understanding what the rest of the group brings to the table is something that helps to make that even stronger. So that, for me, that ambiguity allows me to strengthen the purpose of the committee and really kind of flesh out what are the intentions and level set, because sometimes you might have a stakeholder that has a different intention, and unless you're able to have that conversation, an open conversation in that mix of ambiguity, you don't really understand what it is. So I'm comfortable with ambiguity, and also knowing that I don't have all of the answers, or the premise of the committee might not have all of the answers.
Thank you so much for that, Roger. I am relishing the fact that you relish ambiguity. I don't get to hear that very often. It runs contrary to the kind of prevailing narrative. And I just love that you're seeing it as a positive, and you're seeing a lot of opportunity in it, including an opportunity to kind of get on the same page with stakeholders about what the newly invented purpose may be. So thank you very much for that. Anyone else?
You know, this might follow on a little bit from what's been said. I would love to hear some kind of best practices in terms of encouraging conversation, encouraging trust building, or maybe it's building trust within committee members, and then encouraging real conversation and dialogue. I've only been at Mass General for about a little over a year, but I am part of an employee advisory group, and I kind of, and in other settings, I wonder about encouraging people to speak up and share and that type of thing. So if that is coming in the next part of your presentation, I'll wait for it, but I'd be really open to your ideas, or if other people have ideas about that.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. That is a great question and a perfect segue into the next section, in which we will discuss best practices that help to build trust. If you're not satisfied by the end of this session that your question has been answered, please do bring it up. And just looking back at what we've covered as far as how to prepare to lead a committee meeting, sharing an agenda beforehand and inviting feedback is something that builds trust. It builds trust between you as a committee leader and committee members. It doesn't necessarily build trust between committee members just yet, but it is a good first step for people to begin to trust you and see you as credible and reliable, sharing that agenda and inviting input. Okay, moving on. So one more thing before the next section, I invite you to just jot down one best practice that's been discussed so far, either in the presentation or something that Joseph, Roger, or Nancy brought up, something that you think will help you be more effective when it comes to planning committee meetings. So I'm going to give you just a few moments to jot down one best practice that you're going to take away from this session, and then we'll move on. Okay, so let's go over how to effectively facilitate and participate in meetings. As a facilitator, it helps to speak to the 4 Ps. You don't have to speak to all 4 Ps at once, but over the course of communicating before and during and between meetings, it helps to address these 4 points. The first one we already talked about. What is the purpose? Why are we meeting? What is the charge of the committee? And how is the goal of the meeting going to help us move forward with accomplishing that purpose? Then there is picture. What would a good meeting outcome look like? A lot of people are visual, and so literally think about painting a picture. What does a successful event look like? What does a useful resource that's going to come out of the committee work going to look like? What is whatever outcome it is you're shooting for, communication or anything else, going to look like? What does excellence look like when it comes to this committee's output? The third one is plan, and this is another thing from the previous section that we discussed that is going to help stick to the agenda items. That if you're someone like me, for me, having a plan, having an agenda, it's like this little security blanket. I know what's coming. I can prepare, I can anticipate. And so having a plan and sticking to the plan to the extent that makes sense. It's also good to be open to whatever is emerging. So it's a balance, but having a plan can go a long way towards building that trust and helping your participants participate to full extent. And the fourth one is a part defining the roles that group members will play and making sure that everyone is clear on the expectations. And this is another opportunity to build trust by inviting people to the extent that is possible, to come up with their own roles and share ways in which they would like to contribute by asking them if there's an opportunity. Sometimes the roles are just laid out and what needs to be done, and there isn't much flexibility. But whenever there is flexibility, asking a committee member, what would a meaningful contribution look like for you? And really listening and incorporating that into whatever assignment you're giving them. So those are the 4 Ps. Again, everything is going to be in a resource packet that will be shared with you if you're just joining. If you're only going to take one thing away from how to effectively facilitate a committee meeting, let it be this: have someone else keep the meeting minutes. You're going to need to keep the meeting minutes and share them with your committee after the meeting. And it's going to be rather distracting for you to have to keep those minutes while facilitating a meeting. So ask someone, get someone ready to volunteer to keep those minutes for you. It's going to really help you focus on what is happening in the meeting and what really needs your attention and what no one else can do, which is lead the meeting. And plenty of other people can keep the minutes for you. Okay, so things come up. In meetings, there are great ideas, there is enthusiasm and engagement, and sometimes there is disagreement and there is kind of contentious discussions that happen. So what do you do? Some kind of top level things when someone is voicing disagreement is to seek to understand the other person first and foremost. So ask questions, kind of feed it back to them. Say, I think what I'm hearing from you is this, or I think the issue you're raising is this. Can you confirm for me my understanding? So before you engage into making any suggestions or problem solving or presenting evidence to the contrary of what that person is insisting on, make sure you really, really get to the bottom of what they're trying to convey. And then you have a choice. Sometimes you can resolve a disagreement in the committee meeting without having it hijack the whole meeting. And sometimes it's best to acknowledge the disagreement and invite the person to connect with you after the meeting to talk further. And I'm going to give you some language for how to do that as well. And if you're going to choose to connect with a person after the meeting, make sure it is clear how and when you will be doing that. And that is another thing that's going to help to build trust. The follow-up is huge for building trust. Okay, so what happens if you have a very engaged, enthusiastic participant and they are offering one comment after another? First of all, thank them for contributing to the discussion, and then gently encourage others to contribute as well to make it more balanced. So there've been times when I was that participant who always had her hand up, and I've been on the receiving end of this tactic that I'm sharing with you. And a skilled facilitator would say to me, Susanna, I see your hand is up. So acknowledging that I want to participate and contribute. And I just want to see if there's anyone else who would like to offer anything to the discussion before I come back to you. So that's a very gentle way to, and clear way to redirect attention to other participants and to let me know, like, Susanna, it would not be a bad thing if you chilled out for a bit. And I can take it because it was offered in such a kind, respectful way. Okay, so what happens when someone not just participates with great zeal, but disagrees and brings up contentious topics? Again, even though they may not be contributing in a way that feels good to you, they're still contributing, and they may be contributing something very valuable. So first and foremost, acknowledge and appreciate their participation by saying your opinion is welcome here. So we're building a safe, inclusive space. Again, goes back to trust building. And you want to acknowledge, even though you may not fully appreciate it at the time, that you have given me some good points to consider, which I intend to do, just not right now after the meeting. And then invite them to connect with you afterwards. So again, respect, respect, respect all the way, acknowledge, appreciate, include to the fullest extent possible. And I'll share a story with you after I finish with the suggested language of a naysayer that I had on the committee that I led and how I approached it. Another way to do that, if someone voices disagreement, again, your opinions, your suggestions are appreciated. I have noted them down. So that is very validating when someone jots down our thoughts, what we had to say. I'm not dismissing it, I've jotted it down. I would welcome a chance to continue discussing this after this meeting. So you have addressed it to the extent that made sense in a meeting, because we really don't want to take up so much time with these potentially contentious conversations that we don't attend to all of the agenda items. And then you respectfully redirect everyone back to the agenda. And this is back to questions, comments, or anything that you're not sure how to respond to. You don't have to have all the answers. You acknowledge the question or comment, you jot it down, and then you let people know when and how you're going to be getting back to them with the response. Again, it builds your credibility and it builds trust. And people actually like it when a leader admits that they don't know something in a moment. I was at Harvard at the time when Drew Faust was president, and I was fortunate to attend some of her talks and presentations for the staff. And sometimes she would say, that is a great question. And I'm not quite sure off the top of my head, I think this, but I'm going to mull this over and I'm going to communicate my full response to you afterwards. How great is that? A leader demonstrating humility. So the example that I wanted to share with you is I was leading an intranet committee that had representatives from different departments for an organization I used to work with when I was just starting out in my career. So I didn't have a lot of experience leading projects. And I had this naysayer, and she would question everything, including our ability to deliver on creating this intranet. And so what I did, I would make it a point to connect with her in between all the meetings and ask her for her thoughts. I wanted to invite her thinking. And this accomplished two things. One is that she was not quite as vocal during the meetings because she had those opportunities to vent her frustrations to me, to tell me all the ways why it wouldn't work and so forth. So in the meetings, it wasn't as distracting. And then another thing is she brought up some really good points and she helped me avoid some pitfalls. And so as much as it didn't feel good to engage in these conversations when the other person is like doubting my and the committee's ability to succeed and deliver, it was hugely valuable. And I really credit her with the success of our project. Okay, so before that was all I had to say about how to effectively facilitate meetings. And before we jump to being an active value-added participant, are there any absolutely burning questions? We will do a Q&A break for this entire section, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone is following so far. Okay. I'm going to take that to mean that you're all with me. So let's move on. Tools for being an active value-adding participant. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because if something is not clear to you, chances are there is at least one other person in the room that is not sure. And by asking questions, you're helping facilitator do a good job, because you're helping them be very clear with the group about what it is they are communicating about. You don't have to apologize for asking a question. Just be very short and sweet and put it out there. It can be very helpful. And then my second point is more participation is not better. Better participation is better. And when people just talk repeatedly for the sake of talking, they lose credibility and they kind of get tuned out. So make sure that you are speaking, whenever you're speaking up, it is something that is worth saying. I had a direct report actually at one point, and he was very quiet. He was introverted and he didn't offer much during meetings. And I would sometimes not be sure, like, is he paying attention? Is he engaged? And then at the end of the meeting, and those would be project meetings with other teams, he would just summarize everything so beautifully. And he would pose a really incisive question. And he would just get at the heart of the matter and sometimes suggest a solution, and everyone would be just wowed. I'm not suggesting that you hang back until the very end of the meeting, but this is just an example of how what he did offer, which was little, but so substantive and so relevant and so valuable that it made up for him being quiet most of the meeting. And then other managers would approach me and be like, can we borrow him for our meetings? He's so great at, getting to the heart of it. So this is just an example of how, don't necessarily shoot to participate a lot, just do it well, aim to do it well. Then when you are participating on a committee, there are opportunities to volunteer your time, to volunteer your expertise and skills. And as much as it's great to do that, you want to do that selectively, because if you take on more than you can handle, ultimately you let others down. And that is the opposite of what you want to do. I was working with someone once, and this person would say yes to everything. And then at the last minute, they would say, oh, I'm overwhelmed. I just can't turn this around in time. And I would empathize, of course. And I also didn't trust them so much because I never knew if they would be able to deliver. And so what I did was explain to this person that if you don't think you can deliver on something, let me know as soon as possible so that I can find someone who can, and for whom it may be a nice opportunity, actually. So that helped. So make sure that when you take something on, you can deliver. It'll be good for the committee, and it will be good for your reputation and your personal brand. Okay. That's what I've got as far as facilitating committee meetings and participating in committee meetings. And I welcome your questions and comments. I see Katya is raising her hand.
Hi, my name's Katya. I'm with MGH, and I had a kind of a question related to when you are not necessarily leading or facilitating the meeting, and you feel like the facilitator could do a better job at facilitating the meeting, especially based on like everything you just talked about. Like these strategies are excellent. How could you kind of like get them on board? How do you share this without necessarily like putting them down and saying you're not the greatest facilitator, but can we employ these strategies instead?
Yeah, that is a great question. Can you give me, Katya, a specific thing that, just an example, it doesn't have to be a real thing, but just something for me to work with, something that facilitator could do better?
Sure, maybe encouraging engagement from other folks, or not necessarily like stopping somebody who is sharing a lot and is contributing a lot, but maybe doesn't have the most like substantive points, like that more is not better kind of balance.
Yeah, this is a tricky one because, as you probably know, we can't control other people. We can only control what we can do. And so you're going to have to trust your judgment here about how open this facilitator may be to your input. If you're not sure, you can ask them. You can say, I really appreciate being a participant in your committee, and I wonder if you would be open to some feedback from me. And just see what the reaction is, not just in words, but like tone of voice and body language, as tricky as it may be to read over Zoom, and calibrate what it is you're going to say accordingly. And if they seem kind of closed off and defensive, it may not be worth it. It also depends on your kind of tolerance for relational risk. You may decide to plant a seed, even though it might cost you, or you may decide to hold off and first build some trust and credibility with that person before bringing up something like that. How is that for you so far?
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, anything else that would be helpful for me to speak to in regards to feedback for the facilitator from Katya? Or if you're all set, let me know.
Sorry. Yes, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. Nancy, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. You're muted. I can't hear you, Nancy.
Just resting my head on my hand, sorry.
Okay. See what I mean about difficulty reading body language on Zoom? Okay, anyone else have a question about facilitating a meeting or participating in a meeting?
Susanna, I have a question. How do you handle being voluntold to be part of a committee? What if you're not interested, but you're tapped to be?
Oh, yes. Thank you for that question, Diane. So your initial response to being voluntold may be less than, I'm thrilled. Thank you for the opportunity. Because when you're voluntold, you may question whether you have the time to fully participate or whether you have something to offer or whether it's going to be kind of like what's in it for me. So a couple of suggestions is think about the following with as open a mind as you can, given that you may not be thrilled at being voluntold. So keeping an open mind, trust that if someone has volunteered you to serve on a committee, then it means that you do have something of value to contribute. And even though it may be ambiguous to you at the time, you may not know exactly what you will be contributing or what is needed. Just trust that you can add value and participate in a way that is beneficial, or lead in a way that is going to create positive impact. And the other thing that I would encourage you to consider with as open a mind as possible is that there is something that would be beneficial to you if you participate or lead a committee, even though you did not kind of jump at the chance. So ask yourself questions like, well, what can I possibly learn? Or how can I possibly grow through this? What skills can I develop? Or what connections can I make? Maybe this is a great opportunity for visibility. And maybe this is an opportunity to get noticed, to stand out, to position yourself well for the next step in your career. I see some heads nodding. Anything else related to being voluntold? Okay. So it seems like there are no questions at this time, so I will take it as cue to move on to our last topic of this workshop. Oh, actually, before I do that, just take a few moments to jot down one tip related to effectively facilitating a meeting that would help you in the future, and one tip about how to effectively participate in a meeting. I'm going to give you a few moments to do that. And I'm not looking at the chat. I fully trust that if there is something in there that needs my attention, that Diane or Emanuela will let me know. So your committee is not going to succeed unless the work happens in between meetings as well as during meetings. So how do you keep the group engagement going and keep projects on track between meetings? Prompt follow-up. Whatever you said you're going to be getting back to people with, do it as soon and as thoroughly as you can. Part of that is sharing meetings that outlines all the follow-up items. And then you want to check in prior to the next meeting with anyone who had follow-up items. You want to see how it's going and whether they need anything else in order to deliver on whatever it is they committed to. And then anyone who voiced questions or disagreements or brought up anything that you did not have a chance to complete the conversation on during the meeting, you want to make sure you follow up with them. And again, seek to understand first before you move on to stating your position, your side of things, and moving into resolution. If you achieve nothing else but making the person feel heard and understood, that is a win. And sometimes you may not be sure how to respond or how to handle a person who brought up a disagreement. And so remember, you're not alone. There are probably people and resources around you that can help you and can suggest approaches and can guide you. So seek guidance from a stakeholder or a trusted colleague or mentor, someone whose advice you trust. Now I'm just remembering Nancy's point. In addition to the things that I mentioned that are going to help build trust, building trust between committee members is giving them opportunities to partner up or to work in small groups. So when assigning tasks, look for opportunities for when the impact would be amplified if people joined forces. And through working together, through collaboration, that's a really powerful way to build trust. Don't just send them off on their own. Make sure to let them know that you're there for them if they run into any obstacles, if they have questions. So I hope that helps. And that is how you can keep engagement going between meetings. I will take questions.
Susanna, I don't want to be the person who's always raising their hand, but I very much appreciate your style and everything that you're talking about today. And as someone who has led meetings for many decades, I still continue to learn from people. And in that vein, there's a particularly challenging area that I like to think I've learned how to deal with better over the years, but I'm always interested in how other people deal with it. And it's with regard to an earlier point that you made in the last section about acknowledging people, even when the information that they're presenting may not pair well with the topic you're discussing. I agree, taking things offline sometimes can move you along, putting them on a list can move it along. But have you ever experienced a situation where you inadvertently have created the perception that you're validating what they're saying, and it somehow led to shifting the dialogue? And how do you handle that?
Yeah. So
Sometimes it's that idea that you've somehow lent credence to something while you're trying to be respectful.
so give me an example so I have something concrete.
So
to respond to.
in the context of this meeting, if I decided to have a conversation with you that had, nothing to do with the topic today, but I was very passionate about it. So perhaps I was going to talk to you about another meeting that I had and why it just didn't work. And I was trying to, draw comparisons between how this group was reacting and how that group was reacting. And you said to me, that's an interesting point. All groups behave differently. I appreciate that you took the time to be thoughtful about how this group may be impacted in a way that another group was. Let's talk about that later. I'd love to learn more about that. If I then think that has credibility and I want to keep talking about it, I want to keep bringing up the similarities with another group to the dynamic that I'm finding in this one, how might you redirect that? I'm always interested to learn how other people deal with that kind of situation.
Yeah, it sounds like a situation where perhaps I haven't been heard, or the person is not very good at reading between the lines. So, if I have to repeat my point, I will, saying that's a really interesting dynamic that you're bringing up, and indeed great observations. And with that in mind, let's move on to the next agenda item. And then if it happens again, I might ask, I might say, perhaps I am not seeing a connection here to the topic that we're discussing in this meeting. So help me understand how what you are sharing might inform our discussion. Those are a couple of thoughts off the top of my head.
No, I like that. It's the redirect, right? It's just trying to stay on top of it. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Joseph. Anyone else?
Susanna, there's a question in the chat, and the question is, as a participant, how do you correct frequent use of what you consider inappropriate language without looking like a language police? For example, some facilitators end almost every sentence with whatever, although it seems like something people use a lot in informal conversation. It takes away from serious discussions, especially when processes and policies are being discussed. Another example is when people use the S word when expressing strong feelings.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and thank you for the specific examples. So I would go back to my response to Katya as far as really kind of assess the relationship with the facilitator, how important it is to you, how likely are they to listen, how open they would be to feedback. And then another decision to make based on that, if you do decide to proceed and say something, is do you want to do it in a meeting or do you want to do it in private? And if you, I happen to think that most of the time in private would be best. And I would say something along the lines of, if I'm choosing to do this and they seem open enough and I realize maybe there is a risk of offending them or affecting the relationship, but I'm willing to absorb that risk. I might say something like, wow, you're making really powerful statements in the meeting. I'm really appreciating how you are facilitating us through the process. And I think that, if you would be open to it, I would like to share some of the things that you do that take away from the strength of your presentation. And if they are open to it, if they seem open to it, I might say, you were making this really powerful point the other day in a meeting. And then when I heard you say whatever it is, it kind of took away from it. I think that was just my reaction, take it for what it's worth. But I think that you could get your point across in a very strong, powerful way. If you just maybe be mindful of the effect that some of what you say has on the participants. So that was pretty bold and direct, actually, as I'm listening to myself. So again, it goes back to your assessment of that person's openness to such feedback, and then how much you want to put on the line by offering what could be very helpful feedback. And there are plenty of people who would appreciate it and take it to heart in a good way. Anything else?
Yeah, I got a comment.
Yeah.
I think I appreciate what we've gone over so far. I think I find it often a lot when I have to lead committees, and maybe this is just an issue of not being prepared enough or specific enough in the agenda, but you'll ask a question and you'll just get blank stares, and especially through Zoom, that's comes up a lot. I think, and I'm sure others can relate. And so then that catches, like, especially if you're not experienced in leading committees, has really thrown me personally off guard, because I'm just like, okay, did I not answer it, question it right? Or like, how should I reframe this? Or like, how should I assign? Like, I know some methods are like, go in order of speaking, try to get people to like kind of get that opportunity to speak. I guess just like, what strategies do you have when you're not getting what you designed or thought you would get out of the meeting?
Yeah, thank you, Carrie, for that question. I do get that sometimes when I teach and facilitate. And so my first thing is, people have different preferences. They process information differently. Sometimes it may be that they like legitimately need more time to process what you just offered them and come up with the response. So I say something like, I am very comfortable with silences, and I'm just going to hang out until someone has a thought. And then, and I wait. And then if no one, and usually that's enough. And then offering options is good, like saying, I welcome your thoughts through the chat. Some people prefer using chat. Or I say, are there any questions about my question? Was my question clear? So those are 3 things to try. What do you think, Carrie? Would anything else be helpful?
Yeah, no, I think I just getting used to the silence, especially the Zoom silence, is a skill to build. So I found, just like in some things I've tried, breakout rooms tend to be like really helpful sometimes if you have a large enough group, just because then you're kind of just like thrown into a situation where you are expected to come back with a response to share. So if it's large enough, that has been helpful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Breakout rooms can be great. And then to build upon the silence thing, some people need time to reflect before they can offer a response. So you can say, take a few moments to, jot down your thoughts or jot down your reflections. And then when you're comfortable and ready, I'll take your responses. You can unmute yourself and say something, or you can put it in the chat. So that's how you can like combine a couple of different strategies.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we might have time for one more question or comment before I hand it over to Diane. Okay, I think this was enough of a silence. Diane, is there anything in the chat that would be helpful to speak to?
There was a comment. First of all, you're getting, people are thanking you for providing your expertise, which is great. Just some acknowledgement around using humor throughout the meeting can often help encourage relaxed participation. And someone also said that they've had similar experiences in terms of meetings, and that I lost it in the chat, but I believe the reference was to the fact that sometimes conflict is the issue. And I'm sorry, I'm not doing the person's comment any justice because I can't find it now. But yes, I think we're right at 1 o'clock. So I do apologize to the person whose comment I was trying to share.
So sorry, that was me, Nancy. And I was saying conflict avoidance is more what I run into.
Okay.
So I have a similar experience to Carrie, but thank you.
Nancy, for rescuing me.
No worries. Thank you.
We're at time. And I know it was meant to be a 1 hour session. We tried to give you nuggets that we hope are helpful. We hope that you can take just a few minutes to complete the evaluation. The link is in the chat. And please download the resource packet, which has all of the information that Susanna shared today. And we appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.
One more thing before everyone leaves, if you were having any difficulty opening the resource packet or Susanna's bio with the links, please send me an email and I can forward everything to you. ejmenard@partners.org. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
thank you, everyone. Good luck.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you. My pleasure.